houses that were high up, that you could watch and observe Israel and all the area from there to the fence. Yeah? You can observe Israel from there, and that's why we don't leave them standing. Because then Palestinians can use it to direct mortar fire and rockets into Israel. At some point, we understand it's a trend. You leave a house and there is no house left. And after 2-3 houses, you understand that that's a trend. The D9 will come and raise the house. Yeah, this is a concept that we call in the IDF the day after. Yeah, the idea is very simple. We're not every day in Gaza. So let's take advantage over the fact that we're inside and do some construction work. Yeah, it started in 2009 in Operation Casled and continued in Operation Protective Edge. An entire neighborhood, clean. Yeah, the place is held by soldiers. And house after house falls like a domino. Now look, I can go on for hours with more testimonies and more issues and more examples. Yeah? But I think I've said enough, at least to help us to start a conversation. But I just want to conclude a few things. And first thing is, I think it's very important that you understand that we're not talking about the reality here. That the IDF has gone into Gaza in order to kill as many civilians as possible. No, this is not what we're talking about. Even with everything I've said, this is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a reality where people are sitting in the control room and just, plot as the death toll of civilians is rising. No. But sadly enough, we are also far away, very far away from the official line. What's the official line of the Israeli government? We have done everything to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza. Now, anyone who fires 19,000 artillery shells into one of the most densely populated areas in the world cannot say that anymore. Anyone who sends troops into a place like Gaza with these rules of engagement cannot say that anymore. That's just a blunt lie. Another thing I want to put here on the table. Yeah? Is there is a reason why I didn't go into the testimonies of the behavior of individual soldiers. Yeah? And I was sticking to the big policy, to the orders, to the way the operation was shaped. Because I believe the problem in what happened in Gaza last summer is not the behavior of individual soldiers. In every campaign, and in every military, yeah, you would have soldiers who would break the rules. I've never heard of a military without soldiers who don't break. But the problem in Protective Edge in Gaza were the rules. Yeah? It's not one stupid soldier who decided to use these weapons in that way. Yeah? This is how this operation was designed from A to Z. And that's why, as Breaking the Silence, we came out with a call that we demand a civilian inquiry outside of the IDF into what happened last summer. Yeah? Because the internal investigations in the IDF are basically, excuse my language, I'm a soldier, so I'll speak like a soldier. You know how we call in the IDF military police investigations? Covering your... Okay? That's what they're about. It's about finding one soldier at the lowest chain, somewhere at the end of the chain of command, who did one tiny stupid thing that we can court-martial him and send him to prison, and then come to everyone and say, oh, we're good guys, what do you mean? We treat the bad apples, we have a system, investigations, and trials, and everything is working. Like it should. I don't know if you know it, but in the IDF, the chief prosecutor is also the legal advisor. Yeah? So he should actually investigate himself about the orders he approved. Yeah? I would like to be a fly on the wall in that investigation room. And that's why all this internal cover-up is not really serious. Yeah? This is about having a serious, transparent look into the orders, the rules, the regulations in the design of this operation. We're not in Israel, so I'll maybe put it in the context of the international level. Let's take international law. If we think about what happened in Gaza last summer, if we think about these doctrines, if we think about these orders, the only way I can describe them is what I would call a targeted assassination of international law. Yeah? The basic principles of international law are just violated up front here. The idea of distinction. We need to distinguish between civilians and combatants. Completely irrelevant here. Yeah? Because we drop leaflets, the entire neighborhood becomes a legitimate military target. You didn't hear about that one, huh? Because we warned people, we gave them a deadline. So people, even if they're not armed, are a legitimate target that you can shoot just because they're there. And they didn't listen to our, they had the guts not to obey our orders through the leaflets. Unbelievable. That's a death penalty. Proportionality, another principle of international law. All the idea of the Dakhya doctrine is deliberate, disproportionate destruction of civilian infrastructure, not military. And the last thing I would say, with this I would like to end, and you've touched a bit in the opening, which is Operation Protective Edge is not there alone. There was Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012. There was Operation Castlet in 2009. There was Operation Warm Winter in 2008. There was Operation Autumn Clouds in 2006. There was Operation Summer Rains in 2006. There was Operation First Rains in 2005, and these are only the operations after the summer of 2005 when the settlements in the Gaza Strip were evacuated. And what is very, very clear, is if you look at the operations, you see the clear deterioration in the development of this behavior. And from one operation to the other, it just gets worse. And every operation starts where the previous ends. How many Palestinians were killed in Operation Castlet in 2009? About 1,400. How many Palestinians in Protective Edge? About 2,100. How many artillery shells the IDF fired in Castlet? About 3,000. How many artillery exploding shells in Protective Edge? About 19,000. How many Palestinian apartments we destroyed in Castlet in 2009? About 10,000. How many apartments we destroyed in Gaza in 2014 in Protective Edge? About 18,000. Everything shows a trajectory, yeah? It's very clear. And don't forget, part of the doctrine is asymmetrical war will always come back. It's just a matter of time. So we are basically today part of the countdown till the next operation. That will just be worse. Because that's how things work. And I think that's the one thing, if all the rest is not enough, that puts a lot of responsibility on our shoulders to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I think I've said enough. Thank you very much for coming this evening, and if there's any questions or so, I would be more than happy to.
Say your name, present yourself, and ask a question. I think we should perhaps gather a few, because that's most efficient. So, let's hear you guys. Yes? No? First? Okay, so you and not a serious question. 3 in the front, and then we'll move up. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Who comes up with the names for those Summer of Rains,
computer algorithm.
But it's protected and you feel
Okay. A good first question, yeah.
Next one, second.
Oh, hi. Can you say something about the kidnapped soldiers? What's the story about it, and what's about the Hannibal?
Hannibal.
Yeah.
The last one for this one.
Yes, my question is, in what position do these soldiers give their testimony that are they becoming aware of what they did and what they did?
Okay, so maybe we'll start from the first, second, third. So you asked about the questions. So the beginning of the answer was right. Basically, at least the official argument and narrative is that the computer chooses the names. I'm not sure it's right, but that's the official line. But what's interesting about the names is that not all of them have the same name in Hebrew and in English. That's an interesting thing to note. The Hebrew names are usually offensive, and the English names are defensive. Protective edge is not protective edge in Hebrew. If I would literally translate it, it might be something like a mighty cliff or something like that. Yeah, pillar of defense also, it's not the same. How you would translate amudanan? A pillar of
a cloud.
clouds, yeah? So, yeah, these are very, so, yeah, there is, I think, yeah,
Some creative.
there is a very deliberate,
for
yeah.
Israel itself, the names are
No, the names, I think less about the names in Israel, more about the names outside of Israel that are more, that sound defensive. Yeah, this is part of, yeah, I think that's part of campaign. Kasled is the same in Hebrew and in English, yeah? Because it was around Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, and it's taken from a song of the holiday. What about the kidnapped soldiers? As far as we know is that we're talking about two dead soldiers in the operation that Palestinians basically are holding the bodies. More than what is published, we don't know too much. About the Hannibal procedure. This is actually something that has gotten a lot of attention, but actually it has nothing to do specifically with protective edge. The Hannibal idea is something that was developed in the late 1980s in Lebanon. And the concept is very simple. We prefer a dead soldier, we prefer a body than a captain. Yeah, because of the Israeli cycle and because the political implications and the release, prisoners release and all these kind of stuff. So the idea of Hannibal, you know, I served about 3 months in the border with Lebanon, and yeah, so I'm familiar, very much familiar of the Hannibal procedure from there. The idea is very simple. There's basically two things that are part of Hannibal. The second Hannibal is being announced by the soldiers on the ground. That means there is a person missing, yeah, kidnapped. Two things happen. One, you open fire on the kidnappers, even at the expense of killing your comrade. And the second thing is that the support fire will basically do everything possible to contain the kidnapping, so more troops can come in and catch them. So that means, for example, the border with Lebanon is very simple. There is pre-identified locations in every area, important intersections that need to be blown up to prevent, yeah, taking the kidnapped soldier outside of the area. Bridges, yeah, different things that would be destroyed right away by artillery, by the Air Force, in order to basically control better and be able to reach the kidnappers and get the body or soldier alive. What happened in Rafah specifically, I would say we don't really have enough sufficient verified testimonies to answer you from a more informed and opinion. what we know is what was published, yeah? We're talking about around 1,000 shells from artillery and mortars that were fired within 3 hours. The Brigadier General of Givati. See the purple unit in the south? Yeah, they have the purple brigade. That's the Givati Brigade, one of the infantry brigades of the IDF. He was quoted on the Yediot Ahronot weekend magazine, the largest newspaper in Israel, where he said, we showed them that they messed up with the wrong brigade. But more than these statements, I don't really know the details. The thing is that they said no risk to our troops. I don't understand what's the difference. Like, why do you think there is a contradictory between Hannibal and that? Hannibal basically is in a case where someone is taken. Yeah? Okay, so you're in a situation where someone is taken, and then you want to prevent it. And by preventing it, you basically activate the Hannibal idea where, again, shoot at the force in order to kill them with the kidnapped soldier, and you try to contain it. What really happened there, I don't know enough from soldiers' testimony, so I don't want to kind of like talk about. The question was, but I must say that Hannibal, I know that the media has given a lot of attention, but if you actually look, sometimes it's a bit weird to look at things this way, but ultimately we're talking about one event in 51 days that the impact, yeah, that's the exception. Yeah? The real problem, most of the casualties are not from Hannibal. Yeah? Most of the casualties are from procedures, yeah? Are from the regulations of the normal operation. Yeah? Not in a moment of emergency, so to speak. From the eyes of the army. The last question about people who testify to us. So the truth is that, people who testify, soldiers and ex-soldiers who testify to breaking the silence, when they do it, they know who we are. Yeah? We're not fooling anyone. Yeah? So in a way, this is very much a political choice. Yeah? This is a moral choice in terms of they understand that we are a critical organization. Doesn't mean that we all agree 100% on the same politics. Definitely don't vote for the same party, and we don't believe in the same political vision to the Middle East, all of us, yeah? But at least we have a bit of common ground that is enough for a person to share his story and contribute to our mission. On Protective Edge, yeah? We don't have one opinion in breaking the silence. Some people are against the operation per se, some people are in favor of the operation, but against specific aspects of it, yeah? I'll just give one example. From an officer who served in a control room of the Air Force and was activating what was called a knock on the roof procedure, roof knocking. Have you heard about it? Yeah? The idea is this. You have buildings that you want to bomb. Why? Different reasons. Some of them are what anyone will agree are military targets. Because they're command and control centers of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Some of them are warehouses of ammunition. There's rockets stored there. Some of them are training facilities of Hamas. Yeah, these are clearly military targets. Yeah? One cannot argue otherwise. But some of them are not that clear. What we call, for example, a house of a militant. A building where in one of the apartments, yeah, one guy who lives there is a militant. So in this case, many times the entire building will be bombed down. Okay? More than 50% of buildings that were bombed in Protective Edge, the reason more, because they were a house of a militant. Because one family, one guy who lived in the building, it could be 3-4 story building, yeah? One guy is a militant of Hamas, you take down the building. And then the IDF came up with this idea of roof knocking, which is this great procedure, at least that's how it's being sold to us and being told to us, great procedure of minimizing damage to civilians. You want to bomb a building, you drop a tiny bomb on the roof, that's the roof knocking, that's the signal that this building is going to be bombed. Sometimes you call the family. You watch with a drone from the sky to see whether the civilians are getting out. Don't see civilians, sometimes you drop another tiny bomb on the roof, make another phone call for the family, and ultimately you give the approval for the Air Force and, a half a ton, 1 ton, 250 kilograms, depends on the size of the building, yeah? What the engineers decide it needs to be dropped in order to eliminate the building. And this guy we speak to, who was an officer in one of these control rooms, at 24/7, that's what they've done. By the way, he's not against protective age. But he comes home, and he hears the story about how this procedure is so great, and it's about saving life, and da-da-da-da-da. And that's what he did for 51 days, yeah? He gets mad. And when we contact him, he agrees to speak. And you know why, he says? Because that's, in many cases, that's a bluff. I'll give you an example, he says. There was an area called Gaza, yeah, in the south of the Gaza Strip. This area here. There were many houses of militants. What we've done was knock on the roof, boom, knock on the roof, boom. Yeah? And then he says, for example, there was a building, 5, 6-story building. We knock on the roof, we don't weigh too much, and then we bomb the building. So we ask him, what do you mean we don't weigh too much? He says, 40, 50 seconds. A minute. And then in his own words, he says, militants of Hamas who were in the building, for them, very easily, they can leave. But the grandma on the 4th floor, no way she made it out. So this is what he sees in the control room where he is. He comes back home, he hears a completely different narrative, and that starts the engine rolling, yeah? And then he starts to understand, oh, this is actually not okay. And something is wrong, and people are being lied. I need to say the truth. I need to stand up. This is not acceptable. Yeah? So there's really different reasons why people speak, but ultimately there's at least a common ground.
This area. Okay. Focus on this corner. So you go first, and you, and up there, Chris. Yes. Go ahead.
My name is John Carey.
Speak up.
The question that I have is does the IDF deploy drones and other kind of reconnaissance type units just to actually consider that the area which they are completely demolishing is actually, like there is at least, I don't know, one guy with a Kalashnikov or something? Is there, like, do they deploy any reconnaissance at all, or is it just pick areas on maps?
Just continue collecting the questions. Yes.
Yeah. My name is René. I would like to know if you have any idea what's the impact of breaking the site inside Israel.
What?
What is the impact of what you're doing? Thank you.
Chris, up there.
I have 2 questions. First off, you mentioned how things have been getting only worse and worse and worse. This is at the same time that Gaza has been probably the best monitored war zone in the entire world. So in that sense, how much can just spreading awareness help this situation, and maybe what kind of role can Palestinian armed resistance play? Then the second question, or is a little bit more of a remark, I guess. I was a little bit surprised that you said that war planners aren't trying to maximize civilian deaths. Well, that very much sounded exactly like what you're describing right now, in the sense that, well, for example, it's very hard to justify that they had any real military objective in Gaza. For example, the main objective was sealing the tunnels. Well, I mean, Egypt sealed the tunnels. They didn't have to go into Gaza. They actually sealed the tunnels from Egypt, the access in Egypt. Like, you can't tell me that Israel does not have the capabilities to do the same thing that Egypt could do, just sealing the tunnels from Israel. And then they go into Gaza and they maximize civilian property destruction, and also, well, maybe not even direct deaths, but then still, for me that's an arbitrary distinction because people are dying from disease, from hunger, etc. This whole dogma doctrine sounds to me very much like maximizing civilian deaths, either directly or indirectly through destroying civilian infrastructure. And then does it really matter if they cloak it into military doctrine? The reality stays the same for me.
Okay. So the first question was whether the IDF deploys reconnaissance, drones, and other people, scouts, to observe areas. Of course, yeah, we're an army. We're a modern army, a very developed army in that sense. Yeah, we deploy reconnaissance, but all the idea of preparatory fire, of cover fire, of softening fire, yeah, into areas before you go in, is that it's not, it's not about specific, it's not necessarily about specific intelligence or targets. It's about what we would call in the military, l'orid rashim. Yeah, basically to make sure that heads will be kept down. Yeah, when we go in, yeah, everybody is going to be afraid of aiming at us, of trying to attack, yeah, because massive fire is coming in. So it's, yeah, all the idea is that, the entire area is a target, because that's where you go in. Your question about, I'll go to the last question. It does sound that what Israel tried to do is maximize civilian deaths. That's just not true. It doesn't matter how it sounds to you, but in fact, it's not true. If the IDF would want to kill many civilians, and if the IDF would not do nothing to avoid civilian casualties, numbers in Gaza would be in a very, very different way. Anyone who understands, even just take this weaponry, yeah, and you'll use it without the restrictions the IDF put upon itself in protective edge, and the number of casualties would be, in the six digits, if not more. Yeah, so it's just facts. It might doesn't sound to you, but I believe it's facts. Yeah, it's not something that. And after all, destroying buildings, yeah, with bulldozers when they're empty, it's not going after to kill civilians. Yeah, so it's, one needs to, I'm one of those who believes, yeah, that the situation is bad enough the way it is, that we don't have to tell ourselves stories. Yeah? This is bad enough. Let's stick to what it is, actually. And you talk about there was no military objective in protective edge. I disagree. I completely disagree with it. Destruction of tunnels is. Let's not go into how Egypt destroys the tunnels in Rafah. Yeah, because Egypt has, how many houses Egypt has demolished in Rafah from Egypt, from the Egyptian side? Thousands of houses. Yeah, displaced thousands of people. Yeah, so the last thing I want is to try to kind of let's do things the way Sisi does it. I'm not sure this is the way to go. That's one thing. Definitely as an Israeli, that's not what I ask myself, and that's not what I ask for my army. Yeah, I would like my country and my army to be and act the way I think it should act, rather the way Egypt acts. Yeah, that's not my moral compass. And again, my grandfather taught me since I was a little child that two wrongs don't make it right. Yeah, so the fact that Sisi behaves the way he behaves doesn't make right or wrong the way we behave. So I'm just an Israeli and I focus on how we behave, and that's kind of the way I see things. The last question was about what is our impact in Israel. When we talk about impact, I think we can go in different ways to try to answer. There is always, little stories that can show you, that can indicate stuff. For example, let's just take something from the investigation on protective edge. We're contacting soldiers in and ex-soldiers who served there, making, over 1,000 phone calls, yeah? Getting one after the other, and then one guy agrees to speak. He's a serving soldier, and I drive together with another of the young investigators of Breaking the Science to meet him. And we walk into his house, and he looks at the guy who was with me, and he says, "Hey, you're in a dove." I look at him, and he looks at us, what the hell's going on? You were in my high school a few years ago, you spoke about Breaking the Science. 3 years ago. Yeah? And the guy still remembers his name. And recognizes his face. Yeah, so if we want to talk about an impact for that person, the meeting with Breaking the Science of 2 hours in his high school a few years ago, and then protective age happens, and the guy comes out of Gaza and takes a few days to relax, and Breaking the Science is the window that he starts to understand what he just took part in and what was going on around him. And then when he gets the phone call, because a friend of a friend of a friend thought that he might agree, and we call him, the answer is, of course, I'll be more than happy to meet you, but man, I'm still in service. I'm leaving on Thursday for 3 days after 28 days in the army. I live very far away in the south. Is there a chance that you can come to my place and I don't have to come to your place to speak? Yeah? So I think that's, on a small level, that shows you a lot of impact. On the big political level, of course, we need to keep in consideration that today Israel has the most right-wing government we ever had since the establishment of the State of Israel. Yeah, so big politics is in a very different place. But seeing, I think, the way, I would say, by the way, Gaza, we should put it on the table there, is a very, very controversial issue in Israeli society. We're talking about an operation that had 92% approval rating within the Israeli Jewish public, yeah? That's the numbers we're talking about. I doubt that you can find these numbers in normal democratic societies, yeah? I doubt that there is a question that you could poll the Dutch society and get 92% of people agree on one thing. Yeah, these are the numbers Mubarak was elected in Egypt, right? Like, so it's within that environment that we're talking about. And I think being able to be at the front page of the daily magazine of the largest newspaper in the same morning, the front page of the liberal newspaper, and the opening story on the army radio for the entire day, and talk shows, 8-9 minutes prime time, being able to sit down and talk about the content, I think that's part of it. Yeah, even within that environment, there is something in who we are and what we represent as ex-soldiers and special forces, officers, etc., that gives us an opening that many people don't have. And in a way, that's our responsibility to use these privileges, to fight the occupation as best we can. That also means that on the target list of the government will be somewhere very high up, top of the list. And we see it with different legislation that they're trying to pass to try to prevent our funding and other things. So that, there are clear indicators. Did we end the occupation? Far away from that. Are we going to stop fighting? Far away from that. This is on a very, and this is the last thing I would say, on a very basic note, it's important for me that you understand. I don't see myself as someone who's fighting the Palestinian struggle. I'm fighting the Israeli struggle. This is a struggle over what Israel is all about. What are the moral foundations of my society? Who am I? Which country I want to live in? Soldiers, I didn't grow up at the age of 18, decided to go and have fun in the occupied territories and do what I did. I was sent there. And soldiers who went into Gaza last summer, I sent them there. It doesn't matter if I agreed or not. They were there on my behalf. And what they've done is on my shoulders.
Wait. Sorry, but we're doing it in an organized manner and doing this part, and this time only girl. Yes, you and you and you. Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering, you mentioned my name is Kim, you mentioned all the names of the operations. You also say that each operation starts where the other operation ends. I was wondering what triggers each operation. Is that also getting less and less of a trigger that Israel responds. So is it, because you said that destruction gets more massive, but I was wondering whether the trigger is also growing less massive.
Yes, my name is Maika, and I was wondering, last year Hamas was accused of using civilians as human shields, but there are many testimonies as well from Palestinians saying that they have been used by the IDF as human shields. I was wondering if there were any testimonies like that. That's one for this round.
Hi, my name is Rosa. I was wondering, you said just that your organization is obviously high on the blacklist of the government, but aren't there any consequences for individual soldiers, especially while still serving, giving testimonies, or do they do this in an anonymous way mostly? Aren't they under secret police surveillance after giving a testimony to breaking the silence?
Okay, I'll try to take the questions according to order. What basically starts each operation? You know, we spoke about the series of the operations. The question was what starts it. So I think in different operations, different issues and different stories, and of course there is, in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases there is, I think different people will see things differently. And not always the official line is what I would call the truth, yeah? But it really, you know, it really differs. If you look at Protective Edge, some would say the beginning is the kidnapping of 3 soldiers in the West Bank, and then the intensifying campaign against Hamas in the West Bank, generating, yeah? Some would say it starts before, the killing of 2 Palestinians.